means stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn through the storm, through.
Good afternoon and welcome to our conversation today on Until I Am Free, a conversation on women in leadership champion civil rights. I am Yolanda Sonnier, the administrator for the Howard County Office of Human Rights and Equity. In celebration of Women's History Month, I am joined with women leaders that are making an impact and a difference on social justice, civil rights, and human rights. Before we get going on our program today, I did just want to share with you a little bit about the Howard County Office of Human Rights and Equity. Our office serves as a catalyst for change and seeks to eradicate discrimination, increase equal opportunity, increase equitable systems and outcomes, and protect and promote human rights and civil rights in Howard County, Maryland. The office investigates complaints of discrimination that occur in Howard County in the areas of employment, housing, public accommodations, financing, and law enforcement. This office also has an outreach unit and an equity and restorative practices unit that works with the community in making sure that we bring programming, celebratory events, trainings, all with the mission of trying to eradicate discrimination and increase equal opportunity. If you ever need the assistance of the office or want to partner with us, our contact information is 410-313-6430, or you can follow us on social media at HOCO, O-H-R-E. That's HOCO-OHRE. Thank you for giving me that very quick commercial break before we start our program. So before I introduce our panel, when we talk about the civil rights movement and civil rights leaders, quite often what comes to people's mind are men. Sometimes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, John Lewis, Elijah Cummings, all of these different images come to our mind, but we have so many thousands, millions of women, and not only Black women, but women from all walks of life that have been on the front line of change. They've been marching, protesting, they've been part of the legislative arena, they've been in their communities where they've been advocating for change. And we have all these women who have been pioneer civil rights leaders that oftentimes are forgotten. And so today, we wanted to make sure that we had a conversation, not only about past women that have come before us, but also to highlight the women that we have that will be on the panel today that are out there effectuating change. Before I introduce the panel, the office prepared a video where we did want to highlight some of the women civil rights leaders that do not get enough recognition.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it. Oh, everywhere I go, Lord, I'm gonna
thank you very much for that video. And I love the way that it transitions to modern day to show that the movement still continues today. So I wanted to introduce just very quickly our three panelists. We have Claudia Allen, who's the supervisor of the Office of Human Rights and Equities Outreach Unit. We also have joining us Glendora Hughes, who is the general counsel for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Denise Boston, who is the Equity and Restorative Practices Manager here in the office as well. And Dr. Boston is actually, I'm going to actually give her the virtual microphone at this point because she's going to talk to us a little further about the title of our session today and sort of the purpose of the session today. So now I have the pleasure of bringing Dr. Boston to the microphone.
Hi, Yolanda. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us, everyone. We're in the midst of an important time in history, but we wanted to take time today to honor the women who are the trailblazers of the civil rights movement. And the title of our conversation today is inspired by a book that I read, and I highly recommend, called Until I Am Free, about the life of Fannie Lou Hamer, who was the most important civil rights activist in American history. And the quote goes as following: "We have a long fight, and this fight is not mine alone. But you are not free, whether you are white or black, until I am free. Until I am free." And so today we're going to talk about the ways in which women who have been at the forefront of civil rights and human rights have sometimes, in a lot of our historical contexts, been invisibilized in the history books. And this today is for young people who may not have known the name of Fannie Lou Hamer. She was the one that was singing "This Little Light of Mine." We stand on the shoulders of so many fabulous and intelligent, bright, brilliant, innovative trailblazers and people who fought for people all over the world, not just in the United States, of the human rights. So I'm going to move us on back to Yolanda to talk about and to share in a conversation, the women who we stand on their shoulders and what it means for us as leaders today. Yolanda?
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate that. And I want to bring up our other two panelists to our virtual table talk discussion. We have Glendora joining us, and then we also have Claudia that's joining us. So thank you, ladies, for joining us today for this monumental conversation. One of the things that I love too, the fact that I look at all four of us here, for me, it's a reminder that it's a collective, that we all can't do this work by ourselves, that, as Denise mentioned, we stand on the shoulders of people that have come before us, and we still really hold the hands of other people now that are doing the work in order to make sure that we're all doing this together, because we can only make change together. But I want to start the question with, and whoever, jumps in, and actually, Claudia or Glendora, one of you can answer first. Why do you believe the women's leaders of the civil rights movement are often unknown and sometimes people would say forgotten?
Glendora, I'll give it to you first.
Glendora said, thanks.
Thank you so much. I think when you look at the movement, we don't want to talk about it, but there is that level of sexism that is involved, and there is that level of trying to be supportive of our men and putting them in positions of leadership. And so we usually would take a step back and do all the behind the scenes work and try not to be in the limelight so that our men can be the leaders. But what happens because of that is that those who were really the strategists, the people who really were putting together the various policies and plans got very little, if any, recognition. And so we don't know about them, or we don't really have any uh, um uh, information on some of these um, unknown women who provided a great deal of time and sacrifice for the movement. And even the few that we do know, we don't know them at the level that they should be lifted up in comparison to some of our male leaders, where they were right there toe to toe, but they
Right.
have been relegated to a lesser role. And I think, and in if you read and research, there is conversation, there is um, recording that part of it was sexism, and we're basically told to step back.
Yeah,
Thank
I totally agree with you, Glendora. I think the thing that was also coming to my mind is, you know, at least on the national scale, right, we are aware of King, Rosa Parks, and Harriet Tubman, right? Those are kind of the three individuals that I remember growing up in school, back in Michigan, where those were your Black figures. That's who you were taught about. And I think that there are not just sexism, but I think that religion, I think Christianity also caused some and certain leaders to get the spotlight while others didn't. So if you were a Christian leader, you got spotlight. If you were a middle class leader, you got spotlight. If you were educated, you got spotlight. If if you were male, you got spotlight. If you happened to have been Muslim, if you were a woman, if you were uneducated, even someone like Fannie Lou Hamer, I believe, is a really great example of someone who did not get spotlight because she was both woman, uneducated, from Mississippi, sharecropper background. And then on top of that, you're dealing with the fact that she also was not what many would consider to be classically beautiful, right? So, I mean, even when we now get into the list of names of women in the civil rights movement who we do know of, you might name Rosa Parks or you might name Diane Nash, but you're not going to name Fannie Lou Hamer. And I think that has a lot to do with what we think about certain Black women who are from a certain socioeconomic status and who are also of a particular physical makeup. And I think that that's also a real conversation that we have to have when we're talking about why some women get the spotlight and why others don't.
I'm sorry. Amen. But everyone probably read my lips. I was saying amen. But Denise, I had thought about just moving on to the next question, but I really want you to be able to answer and give some feedback on this as well.
Well, I think that Claudia really touched on a lot of areas and aspects as to why Black women have not been heard or seen or really respected for the work that they put in. They put in some hard work and suffered a lot behind it. I mean, a lot of these women were married, okay? A lot of these women had children. And a lot of sacrifices went into effect when it came to putting yourself on the line to fight for voters' rights, human rights, school discrimination that was happening at the time as well, academically. And so I think that in order for us today to really understand what we have accomplished over the years, we really have to go back to history to see the sacrifices again that women had made for us to be here, to be leaders today. And so I really, I take this very seriously when I look at my own life, that I couldn't be here, do the work that I'm doing without all the women who came before me, and the sacrifices we continue to make. So those sacrifices are not over, right?
Absolutely.
We still continue to think about, even if you are single, what sacrifice are you making when you put the career ahead of marriage and children?
Absolutely.
So it's huge. I mean, we're talking about something really, really big. And not to be afraid to step into leadership. I guess we'll just end it there. Because with all the things that I've said, you were like, well, why would I want to be a leader if I'm going to sacrifice a family? If I'm going to sacrifice a career, if I have to wear my hair a certain way, if I have to do all these sacrifices, why would I do this?
That's right. And I think probably most of you, all three of you, I think I can speak, it's that burning desire inside of you to effectuate change. And so even if you try to stop, I don't think any of you would be able to stop on the journey that you're on. And one of the things that you said, Denise, was about those that have basically mentored people into leadership, where they've watched people that have come before them to bring them to the place they are now. And just kind of leading into the next question, I do want to say this, is that when I look at Glendora is one of those people for me. Glendora is someone's shoulders who I stand on, who I would say has been a mentor. She has, I have watched her, and she may not like for me to say this because it may age her, but because I'm only 25, then it won't age her. But I actually interned for Glendora when I was in law school. And so to actually have her mentorship, her leadership, her guidance through the years, and even now, I will still call her and she'll probably look at her phone and be like, oh. But fact of the matter is she picks up every time. So, and so what I would like to know from each of you, who is a woman that made a significant contribution to the civil rights movement? And I feel like Glendora makes a significant contribution to the civil rights movement as it continues. That would be my answer to this question. But someone that's made a significant contribution to the civil rights movement that you believe should be more well-known, should be more appreciated, and what would you say has been her contribution? So let's go, Claudia.
Sure. I think for me, it would be Prathia Hall. Prathia Hall was also a clergy person in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and was very good friends with the one and only Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the Mount Olive Baptist Church down there in Georgia had actually been burned down by the Ku Klux Klan. And a bunch of them had all gathered together and they were raising money to rebuild the church. And this woman, Prathia Hall, whom Dr. King has says, several times, I don't want to preach after Prathia. Like, I don't want to get up after her. Like, if she goes, then just, pray it out, benediction. And so at this event, Prathia Hall gets up and she starts praying and she goes into this run of, I have a dream this and I have a dream that. And it rung so strong in that building. And Dr. King, they didn't write that he looked up from prayer, but in my sanctified imagination, I believe he, just kind of looked up from prayer and was like, oh my goodness, this is epic. And, they had a conversation and he asked her, if he could use this for one of his speeches. And then come to find out this becomes literally one of the greatest speeches, the most well-known speech that Dr. King is remembered for. And the entire speech, I don't believe, is plagiarized. It's not, completely her work, but that end part, that run is fully the original property, the original intellectual property of a woman by the name of Prathia Hall, a female preacher that oftentimes does not get the notoriety that she definitely deserves.
Thank you for that. Glendora?
Well, the person that really, my shero, she is known, but not as well known that she should be, is Angela Davis. When I was in college, I was in California during her trial for being accused of attempting to break out George Jackson and his brother out of prison in San Francisco, San Mateo County, Marin County. And I followed the trial in the San Francisco Chronicle. They gave a detailed blow by blow description of what went on in the trial. But I admire her dignity and her fearlessness in spite of the fact that she could be incarcerated or possibly lose her life because she was on trial for murder because
Mhm.
judge was killed. And the um, watching that fearlessness and that commitment to stand by her principles, and um, she was acquitted, and then she went on. I read several of her books. She was a communist, which I think sort of caused a lot of people to shy away from her because of her commitment. But she's such a brilliant person because she looked at it from the point of communal uh, 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 policy of resolutions and economic systems in order for everyone to be lifted up. But of course, communism was a bad word, so she was demonized and put in this marginalized position. But she didn't let that stop her. And I remember when I transferred, my father retired from the military. We came back to Maryland and I went to College Park. She came to College Park when we were having protests about the usual white folks mistreating us, and College Park, the flagship university being discriminatory in terms of black students. She came to one of the rallies, and I have pictures of her at the rally, sort of in support, and she did that. She went to many rallies and with students and encouraging people to continue with the struggle and to that inspired me to go to law school
Mm.
because of the law involvement in prosecuting and locking up many activists on basically charges, trumped up charges. The police attacked them, but then they're the ones that arrested if they survived the attack. They were arrested and put on trial. And that's what drew me to going to law school and to um, pursue, unbeknownst to myself, uh, to end up pursuing civil rights as a area of practice in an area where I wanted to practice in and and also stay in the practice and understanding that it requires sacrifice. It requires you to deal with multiple disappointments, and it requires you to just be persistent and stubborn
Mm.
in your work because it's not going to be an overnight, and I may not live to see half of what I want to have done or what I've done, but it is something that, as Yolanda says, sort of burns in you that makes you be persistent in moving forward. So
Mm.
she's my shero, and she
Mm.
is the shoulders I stand on as to why I ended up doing what I'm doing now.
Wow.
All right. And Denise?
Well, I say veggie back. I'm not piggyback. I'm a veggie back from Glendora. when you said, when you said persistence. And for me, it's Fannie Lou Hamer. Um, she was way before my time. She was born in 1921. But what that woman did in the short period of her life, and she lived to be 51. So if you can imagine all the things that she went through and died at 51, which is young, that she did not take no stuff. And she reminds me of my Aunt Shorty. My Aunt Shorty, she told it like it was, right? She didn't cut no chaser, like my father used to say. And I think that that was what frightened so many of the men, except her husband. Her husband stood behind her. But men in the civil rights era were afraid of Fannie Lou, because Fannie Lou was saying, if you get in my way, I'm going to tell you about yourself. And to me, I think that's a strong characteristic of women, because how can we stand up for ourselves and be unapologetic when it comes to, if you feel that you're being discriminated against, if you feel that men are talking down to you because you have a 6th grade education, if you feel that people don't want you around because your hair is sitting all on top of your head. If you look at Fannie Lou Hamer's pictures, she wasn't trying to dress up when it came to talking to people. She was like, you're going to interview me, you're going to interview me just the way I look.
Yeah.
Right? She says, I am here for the community. I am here to fight for these poor children in Mississippi. And for me, my background is psychology. And when I went in, I changed my career in the middle of my life. I was doing something totally different. And I needed to understand the behavior of racism. And that's why I went into psychology, because I said, psychologically, something's not right. And Fannie Lou Hamer was saying, if I am not free, if you don't understand that if I'm in chains, you're in chains too.
Right.
Right? So until you see me and understand that if I'm hurting, we're all hurting, whether you understand that or not. And so I would say that for her, I'm just so happy that I read about her. I had to go back and read about her, because you think you know somebody, and until you read their work and until you understand their journey, you really don't know. And so I'm just really happy that the young lady who just wrote her book, Keisha N. Blaines, brought Fannie Lou back into the spotlight. So I appreciate Keisha for doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. And Glendora sort of hinted towards this when she was answering about the frustrations, disappointments that come along with the journey. And so Glendora, can you share with us just some of the barriers and some of those disappointments you may speak of, but what are some of the barriers that women who lead in civil or human rights face? And if you have seen, what have you done to try to overcome some of those disappointments, overcome some of those barriers that are put into place?
Well, so some of the barriers that I have encountered, I remember when I was litigating cases, and the then general counsel would have us have co-counsel. So 2 of us would try a case, and we would trade off who would be the lead on a case and who would be second chair. And no matter what case it was, that if I was the lead and I had a male co-chair, second chair, whenever we were interacting with the opposite side, they would always go to the male. They would always go to, we're negotiating the case and they would go to my male counterpart and ask them, well, what is it that, and he's like, I don't know why you're talking to me. She the one that's the lead attorney. You need to go talk to her, because it was already assumed that, I was a law clerk or I was the water carrier or the bag carrier. I was not the person they needed to talk to, because the assumption is that, and the mindset, the stereotype is that if it's a lawyer, it's a man. And then, of course, we have the double thing. If it's a lawyer, it's a white man.
Right.
So you're never seen as being who you are. So you have to get past that. And just like the present nominee for the Supreme Court, there's some things you just have to just look at it and stay on task and do your job and accomplish. I always just like to just beat them to death. So underestimate me. I use that as a weapon. They underestimate. They don't really put forth a great effort in litigating against me. So I turned it against them. Okay. I would just use that uh, uh, type of ignorance to my advantage. Um, the obstacles is you first have to get past the assumption that you are not intelligent, that you are not qualified. We see it being played out these last 3 days that people can talk to you any old kind of way, and they're
Yep.
shocked. I mean, literally shocked that you can come back at them and be more articulate than they are and be more intelligent than they are. Then when that happens, then it moves to anger because they didn't expect that. And so that reaction is usually over the top simply because they made an assumption about you and you didn't fit that stereotype. Um, so you always have to be constantly proving yourself, constantly before you even get to have the conversation. You got to establish that you belong in the room,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
that you are not a threat, that you know what you're talking about. And then they're constantly shocked. Wow, you really know? Uh, yeah, you know what? I went to the
Yeah.
same school you went.
That's right.
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 You
And
know, so
she went to Harvard undergrad,
yeah,
Harvard Law School. Like,
yes,
and then for the reporter to, and I don't want to say his name because I don't even feel like it's worthy to say, but to even ask about her LSAT scores, like you can't even get into Harvard without being, yeah, without having the
well, we're talking
credentials
about,
to get in.
or a senator talking about, well, I hope she knows about
Hmm.
law books
Hmm.
than she would about J. Crew
Right.
before the hearing started. And anybody who is a lawyer, like lawyers don't look at law books, they look at case books,
That's right.
they look at statutes. So you
That
say
shows
you're
how
ignorant, you don't even
antiquated.
know what you're talking
Right.
about. Trying to be cute
Correct.
and clever, you sitting up there talking stupid.
Yes.
So
Right.
you this is the constant challenge
Yes.
that we have as lawyers when we're going up, particularly in civil rights. We're dealing with corporations, we're dealing with government lawyers, I mean, we've had battles with the attorney general's office where their assumption that they were AG, somehow they were more bright and more and much better than we were,
Yeah.
uh, and that they could talk to us and behave in any kind of way. And we're having to say, no, that's not going to happen here. But it
Mm.
gets exhausting,
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
absolutely exhausting to have to constantly, before you even get to the work or get to what it is you're there for, to establish yourself and to be taken seriously. And over the years, I mean, I had to learn to be a lot more aggressive,
Mhm.
lot more louder,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
also not be afraid and not care what they thought.
Mhm.
I'm going to say what I have to say, and I don't care how you receive it. If you're uncomfortable, if you're upset,
Yeah.
because you don't care how I feel.
Mm.
That's right.
Yeah.
We worry so much about
Mhm.
how other folks feel. How will the men feel? How will the white women feel? How will this one feel?
Absolutely.
And no one cares about how we feel. So we
Right.
go away
That's good.
keeping it in, having heart attacks, having stress, migraines, because we are not allowed
Right.
to express ourselves lest we become the angry Black woman. You see the struggle that Brown Jackson is having to keep her composure in the face of this attack, this nonsense. And I know she leaves there and her head is pounding because you can't say what you really want to say.
That's
You
right.
have, you have to pause and run it through your head before you open your mouth and say what you don't really want to say.
Right. So, question: since you brought us to Judge Brown Jackson, and like we could see her credentials, we can see, you know, her track record, we can see how she's revered and, you know, praised within the community. But then there's other women, contemporary women leaders
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, are they getting the notoriety? Are they getting the acknowledgement that they should? Like, we'll say um, Vice President Harris,
Mhm.
Tamika Mallory, Patrice Colliers, like Denise or Claudia. I mean, if you can join in on this, like, can you just kind of discuss what you see about the mainstream narrative
Yeah.
surrounding the accomplishments of these women?
Well, I go back to psychology again, and that is that we have been conditioned as women, unfortunately, to be competitive contemporarily.
Mm-hmm.
That we can't lift Vice President Harris up in
You know,
her
that
current
is so on
state.
point. You know, I just have to say, I hear this negativity
Mhm.
about her that just hits
Yeah.
me right here.
And I think that we have to step back. And I think these conversations that we're having today will hopefully move people to understand that we are in this together. We're not separate, even though we're Black. We do have different backgrounds. All four of us have had different backgrounds growing up and different experiences. But what we have in common is that we need to really come together. We really need to see that collectively we can be more powerful than people can even imagine. So I'm hoping that people will begin to see that this nomination of in historic, you know, context that's happening today will help us to slow down and say, okay, how can we support one another? How can we be more um, connected when we know that we're business women, you know, that we can do these businesses together. We know that we can lead together. But what is it going to take for us psychologically not to be conditioned to feel like it only has to be one woman at the top? Only one woman's going to get the respect because only one person can be seen at one time, right? We need to be seen all together in all our different aspects of our careers. And so I think, like what Glendora was saying, you know, we can't afford not to see each other and not to lift each other up. We just can't afford it because they're coming after us. And when I say they, I'm talking about those that crazy ideological opinion that their world is being taken away from them. And this is our world. It's not one kind of person's world. This is collectively everybody's world that we're living
That's
in.
right. That's right. Claudia.
I definitely agree with that. I think another problem or issue as well is whenever women are in any kind of leadership, but particular leadership around issues of civil or human rights or social issues, we're typically analyzed with a fine tooth comb and watched as though people are really kind of waiting for you to drop the ball, waiting for you to fail. And
Mm,
so I think when you have different leaders at different levels, right? So you have someone like a Vice President Harris who is, you know, in the West Wing, right? Like then you have someone maybe like a Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson who prayerfully will end up in the Supreme Court. Then once you get down to more local grassroots social justice, and you're dealing with individuals like Patrice Cullors, Opal Tometi, Tamika Mallory, these kinds of individuals, all three are at very different levels. And so all three are also going to be scrutinized very differently. So right now, Vice President Harris, if we were to really analyze what she's been doing since she's gotten into office, she's really been laying low, more than likely for the express reason of heightened scrutiny, heightened pushback that she
mm,
could receive because she's
mm,
not only the first woman, but
mm,
she's the first Black woman and the first South Asian woman
mm,
to ever hold the position. And so there's a possibility of
mm,
um, political pushback onto the Biden administration and any kind of policy that he might want to get through, if it is in any way attached to identity politics, right? So it's like, okay, how do I kind of fall back? Or at least this is what a lot of Black people think, right? When we get into these positions, when we get into these rooms, going back to Denise's point about the psychology, is I'm now waking up every day worried, thinking about what my body politic can do positively or negatively on whatever organization or entity that I work for. Then if you come to at the more local level, right? Everyone for a period of time was really analyzing the fact that Patrice Cullors had gotten all this Black Lives Matter money and supposedly had multiple homes, that she was taking care of her family. And so then the question is, well, is she using Black Lives Matter money to advance herself financially? Right, then people are like, well, no, these are from her book sales. So then again, now we are analyzing how Black women are leading, how Black women are spending their dollars, whether that be organizational dollars or personal dollars that they gain, whether it be from shows or books or what have you. And so I think that because of that, we genuinely end up in situations where we are not only having to always worry about and think about, well, what am I wearing? Like, is my hair, my clothes, my makeup appropriate?
What car you driving?
What car do I
Right.
drive? What degree do I have? Now I'm also thinking about the fact that, well, maybe because I'm light skinned, I should let the dark skinned people talk first. Or maybe because I went to this school, I should let this one do this. And because I'm in this room, I should fall back. I feel like we're constantly in a nonstop cycle of, how does the person, my essence, everything that comes along with me. I believe it's Anna Julia Cooper who said back in the late 1800s, when I walk into a room, the entire race walks into that room with me. I think that
That's
all
right.
Black women feel that burden, that whatever platform, whatever table they're seated at, that the entire race of Black women is seated with them. And so we're always trying to think through not just the external pressures and the external expectations and the external stereotypes, but kind of like the internal programming that also impacts what we do and how we do it.
Thank you. Whew. Now, you said a whole bunch that we could unpack, and unfortunately, I know we're coming close to our time. But I think we all do that. We all walk out in life like that, with all of those thoughts. And like Glendora says, at a certain point, you do have to say, I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to realize that I am just as, experienced and have the ability to sit at this table, to go and advocate for, what is right, what legislation, whatever it is. So I think we all walk, and we all have that we walk differently with than other people do, and don't have the same concerns. And so I do want to go back to you, Claudia, just for a second. And because we're coming short, if I can get you all to keep your responses a little shorter. But I want to go back to faith. And just bring the role of faith, because you had talked early on about faith and the woman pastor. So what role do you believe that faith has played in the civil rights movement? And even when I say movement, to me, we're still moving. We haven't arrived. It's not a destination. Like, we're still moving. So can you just share with us how you see faith has played a role?
Yes, I will do my best. Like 30 seconds.
No, I don't need a sermon now. No sermon.
I know, no sermons right now.
Okay.
30 seconds. It's a real close, not a Baptist close. So basically, the civil rights movement of the 1950s was birthed out of the Black Baptist Church. It played a very central role in the civil rights movement. When you look at Keisha Blaine's book, she even identifies that Fannie Lou Hamer's faith was central. She even considered her to be a practical theologian, in the sense that she was living out her understanding of Christ in the Gospels. But I think that it's not just that. When we move to the contemporary period, many people will always say, oh, well, faith was a big thing for the civil rights movement, but faith does not matter in this contemporary moment. The Black Lives Matter movement is secular. It's non-faith. And that's actually not true. If you actually look into the core of it, Patrice Cullors considers herself to be a Yoruba priestess. And so what's happening is that the contemporary civil rights movement is being birthed out of non-Christian, non-traditional faiths. And so Blackness is not a monolith. And I think that our current civil rights period is causing us to see that Black people and their faith align with a variety of different denominations and sects. And so we can see Black people and how their faith in Islam is influencing their social politics, how Christianity influences their social politics, but also how the resurgence of an interest in West African religious tradition is also playing a critical role in the resurgence of their social politics.
Thank you, Claudia. Not 30 seconds, but not a full sermon. So that's appreciated. That's appreciated. So Denise, I want to jump over to you because the contributions that women make and women leaders make to the civil and human rights arena are going to be different. They may be unique from what men contribute. Can you share with us contributions that you feel women have made that are different, that only a woman can bring to the room, but it's necessary?
That's a great question, Yolanda. I think for women, and I saw that with our Supreme Court nominee, patience. I mean, even in the midst of all that contention, she brought grace, and she brought a lot of her presence. I could see her talking to her ancestors while she was sitting there. Right?
I saw that too.
Yeah. And so I think we bring a sense of reflection that a lot of folks, our counterparts, our men, don't stop long enough to just breathe and reflect. She took her time answering those questions. And because she wanted to say it in a way, she knows she's got the world on her shoulders. She knows she has women sitting there looking at her. She knows her daughter's sitting behind her, listening to her, right?
That's right.
To be very reflective is a part of who we are as women in this world, that we care about so many people. It's not an individualist kind of endeavor. We know that we care about children, and we care about our communities, and we care about our parents, and we care about our elders. We just bring a lot of caring. And so I think that is what is needed in the room. And she needs to be on the Supreme Court. Those people need to have her spirit up in there, because she's going to make them pause and look at themselves, whether they want to or not.
That's right, Denise. I could see, and I'm sorry, this is my humor part. Like, I could see like the Saturday Night Live version of
so ready
these confirmation hearings, because she is sitting there with such patience and grace, and like probably like thinking, what in the world? Like, I would love to see,
Like, I mean, even Senator Durbin asked, or it wasn't Senator Tillis. He was like, I can only imagine what's going through your mind right now. Like,
right.
You don't want to know.
Right. And I appreciated Senator Booker's comments yesterday of just providing the affirmation to her, because quite often, and one of you mentioned about, I think Claudia's view, that all of the things that you bring into the room, and whether or not, whether or not she's good enough, whether or not she was a great mom, whether or not, all the things that you bring into the room. And he, I felt, just gave her the best affirmation, like, you are good enough, you belong to be here, you should be confirmed. And I think sometimes that is necessary, and we do need to hear that. So each of you, and although we span, I think, age group wise, I think I'm the youngest here, and then just Claudia. We go from different age groups here and having the conversation. But even with Claudia, we have young women, young girls that are looking to you as leaders in this fight for social justice, and making sure that the dangers to our civil rights, because we do have the voting rights that are in danger, and so many other things. Glendora and I talked about the legislation where states are trying to pass where you can't even talk about like discrimination, you can't talk about race, you can't talk about all of those things. And but what would you say next generation of women civil rights leaders to inspire, to encourage them to say, I'm willing to take on this fight? What would you say to them? Denise?
I would say for them to be lifelong learners, to never stop reading and researching, because there's a precedent that comes before you, that you're not starting anything new, that you are standing again on the shoulders of people who did this work for you without you even being, born yet. So I would say continue to learn, and don't think because you have reached a certain degree that it's over. That's always a way to learn something new and bring yourself to the newness. So yes, you're going to bring your whole self. Your parents gave you this wonderful self. And so to bring yourself, and to also know that you are part of a collection of women who brought themselves as well.
All right. Glendora.
What I would say to them, be like, picking back on Denise, a lifelong learner, and do the work, do the research, do the understanding. When you're going to attack the problem, when you're going to address, you need to know more than they know. You need to know their side, their scheme, as well as yours. And sometimes we have a tendency to, yes, it's good to be emotional, it is good to be out there, but after you blow off all that steam, then what? So you need to be strategic. You need to have, after we march, what are we going to do next?
That's right. What's the plan?
What's the plan? When I get in rooms and people, after everybody and gave their version and had what they say, my next question is, okay, so what are we going to do? Let's get back past saying what's wrong and this is terrible and look what they're doing to us. We know that. What is the plan? What are we going to do to change that? Put the energy into that. And also piggybacking on Denise, read and learn what's already been established and build from there. Stop going back thinking you're the only one, that the first time this has been done, and you starting over again. Then we never advance because we keep starting over again because we think we're the only one that knows or has the issue, when there is already a structure in place that has been brought forth by people ahead of you. Build from there. Don't throw that's old school. Well, old school got you to this point.
That's right.
So
That's right.
now take what has been established and move it up to the next level, and stop disregarding, folks, ancestors, our elders. Stop disregarding them, because there's a lot of wisdom and information to go forward. When you look at Judge Brown Jackson, she's there because of that attention to detail, that hard work. Because the struggle, it isn't the TV, it ain't the social media, it's those behind the scenes times where you are digging in and doing that work, writing this legislation, doing the research, fighting these cases. It ain't sexy, it ain't pretty, it isn't, you don't have a lot of followers and likes. It's the
Yeah.
work that's the work that makes the difference.
Mhm.
That's right. Thank you. And before you share, Claudia, I just wanted to share, as Glendora was saying, that just a quote that I saw from Fannie Lou, which was never to forget where we came from and always praise the bridges that carried us over.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah,
think that was, I mean, even, you know, I mean, it's still impactful today. So, you know,
absolutely.
the bridges that we stand on, we've come across, that has let us be where we are, but we do have to recognize and see the progress that was made. And I think also to learn from what barriers were in place,
Mhm.
why
Mhm.
something didn't advance. I think that's a benefit to looking at history as well,
Absolutely.
Yes.
because you can kind of interpret what you are going to run up against,
Mhm.
um, to decide that action plan Glendora was talking about. You know what? That didn't work for them, but for my action plan, I'm gonna put this in place. So,
Yeah.
but Claudia, if you can share with us what you would say to the next
Yeah.
generation or even
I
your
think,
generation.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is listen
Mhm.
to whatever voices or passion, frustration is going on the inside of you. I think that what whatever your heart is going towards as a social issue, then you should listen to that, and that's where you should put your time and your energy and your life sacrifice. But then I would also say listen to the leaders behind you and then the community that's in front of you. I think sometimes when we get into this work, like has already been said, we come in thinking that we have all the answers. And so I've read all the books, I've been all the places, I know all the things. I'm coming in and I'm telling you what you should do. And I think that sometimes we need to read all of the things and research all the things and pray about all the things, but then we've got to at least be willing to sit quietly and talk to the people who have been doing this before you, and then also be willing to listen to the people that you're trying to serve, that you're trying to make change for, because they are not ignorant, incompetent. They know what they need, they know what they want. They may not have the action plan or the access to generate whatever equity they need, but they're not clueless. And so I think that that's probably what I would encourage people my age and those behind me to do right now is to listen to the leaders behind you, listen to the leaders in front of you, and listen to the voices that are inside of you.
Mhm.
Thank you for that, Claudia. And Denise, before we close out, can you just share that book one more time, for the listeners? The Until I'm Free. Who's the author?
The author is Keisha N. Blaine, and it came out last year, and you can get it anywhere. So, Until I Am Free. Good
Thank
night.
you for that. And so, Denise, Claudia, Glendora, thank you for all of your participation today. Thank you for what you continue to do to advance our community. Thank you. And each of you do it in your own ways. And that makes it great because we need you in all of the different pockets in which you are at. And so I appreciate everything you do, and your struggle and your leadership and your expertise. And so I ask that you continue the fight, because we do need you. And for those viewers, thank you for participating today. We appreciate you tuning in, and listening to this important discussion. Again, the Office of Human Rights and Equity is a resource for you. If you feel like you have been discriminated against here in Howard County, please contact our office. And if you want to partner with our office, please feel free to contact us. I did want to leave a quote and with you, and we talked about this during the discussion, but Fannie Lou said, whether you have a PhD, a DD, or no D, we're in this bag together. And whether you are from Morehouse or no house, we're still in this bag together. And I leave you with that is we all have to join together. We have to listen to each other. We have to come to the table and have the discussions. And we have to realize that everyone's voice needs to be heard. Thank you for listening today. Have a great one.